Hi, y'all. Today, I'm fortunate enough to be here with Edward, and he was in our class a year ago, actually. And so we're going to get this interview started. So, Edward, tell me when you graduated and when you started with Oracle, I believe, right?
Yeah, so I work at Oracle now. I graduated in December of 2016 with the degree in comm studies, focus in corporate communication. And I started at Oracle 2 months later in February in what is their class of program. So I did a little more than a month of training with Oracle and then got in the seat and started selling.
That's great.
Yeah.
So tell me about your training in particular.
Okay, so our training was broken down into two segments. We had 2 weeks in the Austin office and then 3 weeks in the Silicon Valley headquarters there. And really their purpose of training was to not only tell us the product, but also kind of how to talk to the customer. We learned personas, what kind of people we're going to be talking to. And we also learned what are we trying to achieve. Whenever we talk to somebody with our first call, our second call, our third call, et cetera, what kind of information are we trying to extract from them, and what are the right questions to ask?
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So who do you sell to? Who are your customers?
So my territory is actually Canada. So I work with a lot of Canadians, which is new for me.
Yeah.
But I sell to IT professionals. So I'm talking to database administrators, systems architects, things I'd never heard of until I started at Oracle. And that's who I talk to every day, people who probably know Oracle better than I do.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of also CIOs. And even if we get kind of a big deal rolling, it rolls up to a CEO who has to approve it.
That's great.
Yeah.
So what was the transition like learning to talk to that kind of a buyer?
So it was a little difficult because, like I said, they probably know more about the products that I sell than I do. They're hands-on with it. They use it every day, and they know the frustrations with it. So it was a big learning curve. A lot of these people don't get called on the phone a lot. You know, they work on computers. They don't talk to people all the time. So you kind of have to meet them where they are. You have to match their tonality. You have to know, are they having a good or a bad day? Immediately when they answer the phone, you can kind of tell if they're going to want to talk to you or not.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So let me kind of segue into, tell me what the best thing is about your job. What do you love the most?
The best thing about my job, it's my upper sales reps. So the people who actually start closing the deals, I kind of just prospect for them, but the people who actually close the deals and make them happen, they're so smart and they're so willing to help. I learn something from them every day. They're committed to their job. They've got time management down. They've got conversation with customers down. So that's really the best part, is to know that I can still learn outside of school, and there's still something to be taught all the time.
That's great. So tell me some about, you talked about your upsales people, is that what they're called? And tell me about your role and what their role is, and how do y'all work together?
Okay, so I work with, we call it a virtual team. So like I said, my territory is Canada, and I'm never flying to Canada to talk to any of these people. So my role as they call it an SDR, sales development rep. A lot of companies call it a BDC.
Yep.
My role is to prospect. So I'm searching on LinkedIn. I'm searching on our internal tools, our CRM tools, to find clients within the accounts that I have. I've got a phone number and email address, and my role is just to reach out and have the first point of contact and to say, hey, this is Edward. I work with your Oracle account team or your Oracle resource team.
Yeah.
We're here for you. You guys have an Oracle install. And you kind of approach it as more of like, let me be a resource to you, right? And so I try to get them to tell me how they work with our technologies and what troubles they may be having. And if it turns into what we call an opportunity, which means they kind of have a need and maybe they have some sort of budget or some timeline for when this needs to be fixed, I'll present that to what I call my OD rep, their Oracle Digital Rep.
Yep.
And they will then start contacting the customer. I'll kind of introduce them together, and they'll start getting more technical with the customer and really start prying and asking those important questions. And my OD rep works in Austin with me, but then we also have field sales reps.
Okay.
And they handle transactions that are over a certain limits.
Dollar amount, right?
Yeah, over a certain dollar amount. And they're in Canada.
Okay.
So, I'm always on the phone with them. We have cadence calls is what we call it. And myself, my OD rep, and the field rep, that's our virtual team.
Yeah.
That's who I work with on a day-to-day basis.
That's great. So what does your typical day look like?
So a typical day really looks like, well, I would say, I'm just now figuring that out. Time
Right.
management is a huge part of it.
Okay.
Nobody has come to me and said, here's what you have to do today, right? They
yes.
say, here's what you have to do this quarter, and the quarter lasts for 3 months.
Uh-huh.
So you've got to be strategic. But as far as day-to-day goes, I would say the first thing I do, I get in, I check email, and I send out follow-up emails, respond for about an hour, hour and a half. And then I'm going to take a look at, okay, who did I contact? I always do every other day, so 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Have they gotten back to me yet? No. Let me give them a phone call. Let me send them another email, right? So I do even more follow-up. And then usually by then, it's about lunchtime. Come back from lunch, reconnect with my virtual team, right? We usually have a phone call almost every day just to kind of touch base. Here's the conversations I've had. Here's the conversations you've had. And that takes about an hour. We come up with a plan for the rest of the day. And then usually it's just making phone calls, sending emails. And then the last hour of the day, you just kind of take care of some paperwork, administrative things.
Yeah.
Setting up, if I have a customer, we set up meetings. I send them emails and agendas. And if they've asked for any additional information, I try to gather that and send it to them at the end of the day, so that way they kind of have it ready in their inbox or in their voicemail box
Yeah.
for the beginning of the next day.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what does a career path look like for you?
A career path for me looks like I would be in this role for about a year. So I've been there right at 6 months.
Okay.
So in those 6 months, learn more, continue to prospect, continue to just grind out all of this work.
Yeah.
And then I will make an application to the board. And the board will say, okay, your numbers look great. Your manager has great things to say about you. Your virtual team does. And they would recommend that I go up to that OD role.
Okay.
So then, in that OD role, I can start actually closing deals that are under a certain dollar amount.
Got it.
And working more closely with the customers, sending offers and
Yes.
sending what we call white papers.
Okay.
And, really figuring out, who are the decision makers and who really has authority within a company.
Yeah.
And it's a little more autonomy
Yeah.
in that role.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that's at the year mark is
Okay.
whenever you start making that progression into the OD role.
And what does OD stand for?
It stands for Oracle Digital. I couldn't really explain why. That's the name. There's organizations within Oracle, and that's the name of that position/organization.
Got it.
And we just call them ODs.
Yeah.
I don't know how they chose it, but it sounds nice, I think, is why they really
Yeah.
chose it.
It's so funny because when I worked in a high-tech company, we had all of these acronyms, and I would go out to dinner with my friends, and they would say, "Would you quit? All you do is talk in acronyms now." So I know how that goes. They set up
Everything at Oracle is a 2 or 3 letter acronym.
Yeah.
Everything.
That's great.
Yeah.
So we talked about your career path, and it sounds to me like you do a lot of prospecting. And you're doing a lot of digital prospecting, you're making those initial phone calls, and then there comes a point where you pass the customer off to either this OD rep or to your virtual team that's in the field.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yep, that's right.
Okay, cool. So how does that relate to the class? What did you learn from the class that maybe helped you understand and navigate in this role?
So even though I'm not really, closing deals, I'm
Right.
kind of doing like warm handoffs. I still know what the end goal is. I know what my virtual team is trying to get out of this conversation, right? So a big thing of it is qualifying and disqualifying. And one of the harder things to do whenever you're in the position is to disqualify. You're so excited. You want to make money.
Yeah.
You want to get these conversations going. And, if somebody expresses the slightest amount of interest, you're ready to get the ball rolling. And that's just
Yeah.
not always the case. Things don't always work out, I'd say a majority of the time.
Yep.
It's not a favorable conversation per se. So I think one of the most important things in the class was about qualifying the customer. And, it takes a little bit of time. It takes time away from you to say, like, I've put in this much work into this customer, and it's not going to work out.
Yeah.
They don't have the authority or they don't have the budget for this. I'm just going to have to reconnect with them in a few months. So that really stuck with me from the class. And then also actually spin questions. So, I mean, as far as prospecting goes, especially the way that Oracle likes to do it, I would say spin questions happen before I even hand it off, right?
Wow.
So if a person is willing to talk, I really ask about their situation. What's your environment like? What is your day-to-day task? Okay, and then we've got, is it problem, right?
Yep.
So I'm saying, what's holding you back from doing your job right now? What are some issues? You have projects coming up. Are you worried about this project? You don't have, all of these tools that you need. And then we've got I, which is
Implication,
right? So we're going to ask, if you had this, right?
Yeah.
I kind of present them with a scenario like, if you had a tool that integrated your data, wouldn't it make these things, so much better? And then need payoff is kind of saying, like, well, look, Oracle's here to help. We've got tools for you, and when people hear Oracle, they think, oh, it's just so famous, especially if they've never worked with it. They're like,
really,
it's
interesting.
we can't afford it. Things like that. So it's kind of trying to dispel those myths and say, hey, I'm just asking, I know I called you out of the blue today. We've had like a 10-minute conversation. I don't want to take up a lot of your time, but it sounds like you could benefit from something that we probably have. Let's put time on the calendar and have a 15-minute conversation with my team and figure out if it's a good fit. If not, we've learned a little bit about each other and we can go our separate ways.
Yeah.
So spin questions are very, very important. You don't want to waste your time or your virtual team's time.
It's great.
And so that's why it's really important to kind of have those questions and make sure the customer's qualified.
That's good.
Yeah.
You mentioned to me whenever we met back up that you still have the textbook on your
the
desk.
ABCs of selling relationships. So yeah, I still have that textbook. I've highlighted a few things that are really important, and obviously like things like spin are great, but I kind of always keep it there. It's a good conversation piece if anybody comes by my desk. And it's good to brush up on, sales, it's up and down, and you can't get too high with the highs or too low with the lows, even not only day to day, but even by quarter. You can have a bad quarter, right? So it's always kind of good to go back to that and say, like, look, I know how to do this. Sometimes it is me and sometimes it's not me. It's just the timing or it's the territory. So the textbook's always good to have to kind of bring me back and remind me, like, this is what interested me about it and this is why I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you had said that your team is really your favorite thing about working as part of that team. What are some of the hardest things that you have to do in your job?
Some of the hardest things, so Oracle's a big company. You've kind of got to, with any company, there's politics, but, especially with a big company, it's kind of like, you can't tell everybody everything whenever you're training them. Some things you just kind of learn as time goes on, and even 6 months in, I learn new things every day, about filing the paperwork, about what kind of people do I want to talk to? What kind of accounts should or we shouldn't touch?
Yeah.
So one of the harder things is just knowing what kind of questions to ask, especially to your team, right? I work with so many different people. It's hard to get them on the phone for us to kind of align with one another. So that's definitely one of the hardest parts is making time for your team to know what their expectation is for you and what your expectation is of them, right?
Yeah.
Like if I'm going to give them something, I'm going to need something in return. So it's a little tricky to navigate that sometimes. Every manager has their own way of how you should go about your role and what they also expect of you. So you also can't compare, right? We've all got the same metrics, but we have different ways of hitting them.
Got it. That's helpful to know.
And you kind of just have to roll with the punches and say, like, this is the hand I was dealt. I'm going to do my job to the best of my ability.
That's great.
So yeah.
That's great. So if you were to give some advice to the students that are taking my sales class, what advice would you give them?
I would say, leave your judgment at the door. I definitely never thought I'd get in a sales role. Even my parents, when I told them I got the job, they're like, "You don't want to do that," and I was like, "Well, I don't know. It's not something I'm used to." And also that selling happens in every part of your life, right? I mean, a lot of us as students kind of have jobs in a call center, or I used to have a job at a nonprofit, and I would try to get people interested in our workshops. They're free, but still, I've got to generate interest. So I would say keep an open mind and try to relate sales to everything in your life, because it happens everywhere, right? I mean, I think one of the biggest, misconceptions is that sales is only for a certain kind of person. I mean, no matter what you're doing, even the people I talk to, IT professionals, right? If I present them with a solution that's going to fit their needs, and they're not the decision maker, they're going to have to sell this idea to their manager.
Totally.
So whatever role you take, you kind of have to have that salesperson in you to get what you want out of it and to get what you need out of it.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much. This has been really helpful, and I
awesome.
hope that our class really enjoys and can learn from Edward's wisdom. So thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.